Welcome to another episode of the Vital MX post-race show where we will be discussing the third round of Monster Energy AMA Supercross. And typically, the third round is well known for being the craziest, the biggest spectacle of the season for various factors. But is it possible that the third round on this occasion has caused Monster Energy AMA Supercross to correct course and return to the narrative that we perhaps expected when this season began 2 weeks ago? I'm your host, Phillips, and before we go any further, allow me to thank Decal Works, Yamaha Motor USA, Fox Racing, and Yoshimura for their support of the Vital MX post-race show. It is invaluable, and we'll hear more from those sponsors in the next hour or so. I'm joined by Michael Lindsay, as per usual. How's it going?
Good. Not freezing anymore. Being on the floor shooting photos in a t-shirt when it pours rain is not a great idea.
Okay, nice and cheery start to the podcast, as always.
Cheery.
Always. Very excitable. So,
Great.
do we want to do the track? Do we want to do the overarching picture of the series, which I find quite fascinating? Or do you just want to get into Jett Lawrence, who won the 450 main event and was naturally a big story?
Let's go track first. I loved it. I mean, Quad City, big rhythms in. The 3 in after the one quad lane was pretty cool to watch. I mean, overall, I was a big fan. Back-to-back whoops, steamrolled whoops. Another really solid sand section. Big fan.
Yeah, I feel like the tracks have been good so far this year. And certainly unique. Anaheim 1 especially, you kind of looked at it, it felt unnatural. Even this, again, same floor plan, obviously, as Anaheim 1. But just I don't feel like I've seen an Anaheim laid out in this way, really. Perhaps an effort is being made to be creative, look at the situations through a different lens. I don't know. But the big news, which also relates to being creative and looking through things in a different lens, is the whoops. The first whoops were prepped as per usual. The second whoops were steamrolled, similar to what you see in Paris and other off-season events. Naturally, as you would expect, opinions were all over the map, but I believe that what I've zeroed in on as the main opinion, or the common consensus in the paddock, is that Anaheim wasn't the dirt to come to a conclusive answer on steamrolled whoops, and we need to do it at Arlington, for instance, and then perhaps we see the true benefit of it. They didn't roll it before the main event, so it kind of started to develop, or by the time the main events came around, it was perhaps closer to a regular set of whoops. But I feel as though every rider would be intrigued to try this somewhere with soft, tacky dirt, which is, of course, what Paris has, and that's why it works so well in Paris.
Yeah, definitely West Coast is not where I would have thought they would have done them. And like I said, I saw mixed opinions on the guys talking about the second set, even the Dirtworks crew looking at it and how it was breaking down, but more dry West Coast dirt, it just kind of explodes. Also, though, kind of weird, the first set, honestly, I would say walking next to the lane and looking at it, the first set looked way more messed up. And the first set you come off that double and everybody gets light coming into it because you come off the double land and everybody kind of hops up on them with momentum. So the first set, they're not even impacting as hard per se. They have more momentum to carry. In the second set, they were kind of like disappointed, I guess, how quickly it was breaking down. But the second set was right out of the corner and just a lot more force is applied on the first couple. I still thought visually the second set held up pretty decent, even though that's not the conditions or dirt you would think of steamrolling whoops for.
I should say the common consensus was also that everyone was very pleased to see that the series is trying different ideas, different concepts, and looking for ways to improve. And as mentioned, I think if we implement this come East Coast, it should yield very positive results, overwhelmingly positive results. And it's just nice to change it up maybe each week and just, head to a Supercross and be like, hey, what are we going to get this week? Is it going to be a regular whoops, steamrolled whoops, or maybe a third option that we are yet to discover? But I actually struggled to talk about the Anaheim 2 track because I am already fixated on the Glendale track, because rather than do the extremely long start straight, which I feel like we've done every single year at Glendale, We have a short start straight going across the width of the stadium, which opens us up for just long rhythm after long rhythm after long rhythm. And that is exciting to me. So I am already locked in on Glendale positivity. Another, I don't want to say unique, but yeah, unique track, something that we haven't seen in Glendale before. So I like it. I'm in on the tracks in 2025. Agreed?
Agreed.
Good. So, back to what I said off the top. I feel as though coming into the season, it's obvious to state that Jett Lawrence was the favourite in 450s, Haiden Deegan was the favourite in 250s. Now that they've both won on the same night, there is a part of me that feels like we have moved away from the craziness of a parity, all of that good stuff, and perhaps corrected course to what you would consider normality. Normality has been restored. However you want to phrase that, that is my, I wouldn't say my overarching feeling leaving Anaheim, but it's my suspicion. It's what I'm curious about. What says you?
A little bit. I would say 250s are right up to what you would have suspected coming into the season, dropping the people that got injured. Okay, a Haiden Deegan win, Juju, Jordan, those guys right in there, but again, Haiden winning, albeit the 250 wasn't as much of maybe a gap or runaway between Haiden and Juju as I would have, if you were going off preseason predictions. 450s was definitely odd, though. Not a dominant Jett performance, but a very convincing one, followed by a weird night for Chase and Eli. So just something that kind of worried us early in the year or preseason was Jett getting a great result with a bad night for Chase and Eli. But somehow that still hasn't ended up with Jett with a red plate, oddly enough.
Well, you say that like you would have expected him to be higher up. I am of the opposite opinion. I'm surprised that he is as close as he is, because although Chase has missed the podium twice in a row, he's been in the top 6 every week. Yep. Eli has now been in the top 7 every week. He was 7th, right? Yep. Jett, top 12 every week. So, I still feel as though he should be further back than he is. I'm quite surprised that essentially, he's level with Eli now. So I'm surprised that somehow his combination of results behind Eli by quite a way at Anaheim 1, behind Eli in San Diego, ahead of Eli this time, but somehow that equals equal, which is a weird thing to say. So yeah,
fun pair, different sport.
Very, very peculiar, I feel, to see Jett this close, even though he did win and in a dominant fashion at that. And it's not just the main event ride that makes it feel dominant. It's the qualifying where he was 9/10 quicker than anyone. That set a tone, and then when you, obviously that then exists in your subconscious, and then you combine that with the main event win, and it's just a little feeling of maybe. Technical track, most technical track we've seen this year. I feel like that does play to Jett. Hard to say because naturally everyone at the top of 450X is 450 SX is so technical, so amazing. But I do feel like a track like Anaheim 2 would play to Jett, so maybe that's it a little bit. But yeah, let's just say I'm watching this space, and if Jett wins in Glendale, this space will be a little more conclusive.
Well, was it one I saw in stats end up being true is the longest I believe Jett usually goes without winning is 3 races. And he basically came back and won again after 3 races of not winning, if you consider Supercross from last season, because I believe it was next to final round last year was his last win. 2 podiums for him, only 1 podium per se for Chase and Eli. Does that shock you at all that Chase and Eli have only each been on the podium once and Jett already has been twice, considering how bad the season per se, how bad it started?
No, what surprises me, and this was going to come up, is that Anderson and Roczen have had more podiums than Eli and Chase. That is a stat. It's not really a stat. That is a statement that opens up Pandora's box a little bit. A lot to unpack from that particular message, I do believe.
No, it's been fun, especially I think after, not as much the first round, last round, we talked about this last week, and I was just kind of curious where to land with Jason because a lot of hype coming into this season, but to see him have 2 podiums and have extremely strong rides last night and then see how Kenny's have been, playing back the race. Again, I always say this, being on the floor, shooting, miss little stuff, just seeing even that mid race, like past the 10-minute mark, like how close Kenny was with Jett and Jason during that battle and how much he hung in there and how good Kenny looked in a lot of different areas of the track. Very impressive moments from both Jason and Kenny on the night. Like, I mean, in their own right, I would say to equal ends, Jason and Kenny were as equally impressive. Like you said, Chase was really good in the first whoops and had some good key areas, but to me, Jason and Kenny rode just as impressive, if not more impressive. And then Eli's was just kind of, just there.
Well, to correct course a little bit and go back to Jett, on press day, very good spirits, which I feel like has been true for both Lawrence brothers this year. Very forthcoming in interviews, very cheery, very chipper. Nice start to the Lawrence brothers season in a mood sense, I feel. But Jett was quite adamant that he almost has no questions with bike setup at this point. There are improvements to be made, very, very minor, but it's more, as we discussed last week, personal habits that he needs to break and personal issues that he is looking to fix. He was really like wanting to move away from the bike setup talk. Obviously, for good reason, based on how Anaheim 2 played out. Perhaps I still have a little bit of question about Jett Lawrence starts, but then Hunter's have been great. But Jett's, I mean, they haven't been bad. I mean, Anaheim 2 was his best start of the season. I don't actually know where he was. I'm just going to pull that up. Well, he was fourth. But still, I feel like he hustled to get in there through the first couple of corners.
Yeah, they're aware. Like, while I was waiting to interview Jett, I heard Lars talking to Steve, and I mean, he referenced that. Lars said they know they have a little bit of work to do to get the starts, and they feel like they've identified it from what I heard him saying. But they were aware that they are off the mark from last year, particularly with Jett's starts overall. And like I said, even though he's been good with positioning, they know that the jump, the drive, some of that stuff is not up to par. Also very interesting for the boys, just, they had a better weekend last week after they had stayed in California and tested for a week, so they were confident to go home. Didn't really get to baseline anything. As a lot of people probably saw, the weather in Florida was kooky all week, and I think they told me they rode a little bit, was it Wednesday or Thursday? And it was just pure slop. They said they rode a little bit, and that's actually, they had to switch on to press day on Friday, basically, to just confirm some stuff that they plan on changing because they got no quality riding in this week.
Yeah, they weren't actually meant to be on press day. That was added, I think, Thursday night or Thursday at some point, which a little surprising with all that happened to see them opt into press day rather than opt out. But there you go. Another observation I had of Jett, early in the main event, in the whoops, it was like quite sketchy. Bike was dancing around a lot. I even said to someone, I don't know if this is sustainable for the entire main event. But yet, as the main event went on, the bike seemed to get more stable in the whoops, and I don't really know how that happens. But by the end of the main event, he was super consistent through both sets. But definitely early on, the first set of whoops especially, and the second, it was quite hair-raising.
I think he struggled, like something I was going to say, being, you see it on TV, you saw it drizzled on four. It poured right at the end of the 250 main. Those first 5 laps of 450, I was super impressed how hard everybody was pushing, because just walking the surface in a lot of places, it was slick. And I noticed it a little bit with Jason, watching Jason and Jett kind of battle early on that first set you were talking about, is Jason was cleaner in the first set whoops because he had better drive coming off the double. Like, Jason would enter quicker and be able to coast towards the end, where it looked like Jett was getting almost like hung up coming off the double something. He was trying to accelerate a lot on the first couple, and he would start to dance towards the end of the race between the track cleaning up, and it looked like he changed his approach. He was able to get more drive coming onto him. So he was more like Jason. He had enough momentum early on that he wasn't on it as hard in the middle, because the early part of the race, he was still, it seemed like, accelerating on the first couple and was definitely losing the rear end a bit.
Well, talking about the track coming around, in the first 8 laps, Jason, Kenny, Jett, all of their lap times were fairly comparable. And then, let's say from lap 9 to lap 15, the track was obviously in the best condition, and Kenny, Chase, Jett, all of their lap times dropped. Jason stayed fairly consistent to the beginning of the main event, so it's not that he got slower. It's almost like he didn't evolve with the track like the others did. It's actually quite surprising when you look at just simply the best lap times, because Jett and Kenny were almost identical in their times. Chase was right there too, within a tenth of Jett and Kenny. Even Hunter was only a tenth slower than Chase. But best lap time, Jason was half a second off of Jett, slower than Justin Cooper, slower than Eli, a tick faster than Webb. So if you look at the fastest lap times, it almost is quite peculiar to make sense of the fact that Anderson was so much in the frame for the win. But I think his downfall was simply, as the track evolved, he didn't evolve with it. I don't know how best or how better to put that.
It's funny because I heard, I think it was Larry Brooks. I heard somebody on the HEP team and walking kind of make that comment. They were stoked about that with Kenny because they saw Jett evolve with the track, and they kind of made that comment about Kenny being, you know, a little on par there. They felt like he adapted really well as the race went on. That helped him a lot. I was also really, I don't want to say almost like surprised. It was very interesting watching Jett and Jason battle in both their heat race and even in the main because of, you know, some of the history from last year. Jett was being extremely, I guess the word would be trusting. There was a lot of places like if Jason made a mistake and double in, again, the rhythm that's a little bit before the finish line. Like I have some photos of Jett threeing in, kind of turned up, like trying to second guess if he was going to jump into the back of Jason and then try to thread the needle on that next 3.53. He kept trying stuff like just very, I was surprised how clean their racing was, but how much they were trusting each other considering, you know, last year they had some incidents and I didn't know if they would be, in Jett's case, he'd be that comfortable, you know, getting that close to Jason and risking it. But overall, he's putting it in there, but was also patient. Both the heat race and the main were very fun to watch.
Yeah, I think everyone was watching Jett and how he would handle Jason, and he was certainly cautious. And Jason was certainly forceful in his defense. Nothing over the line, but he definitely was playing the game. But in a press conference, Anderson actually said that he spoke to Jett at the podium, leaving the podium after the race, and said, like, I may talk a lot of shit online, but when it comes to racing, I'll race fair. Which is kind of what you want. Like, and to be honest, I think that I would have said that of Anderson anyway. I can't think of a time where I've seen Anderson, in a main event setting especially, go out of his way to destroy the Lawrence brothers, which I think is maybe the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I would say race fair. Jason's been... The word's not dirty. Jason can get very aggressive. So I could still see from Jett's standpoint being a little cautious, but I don't think of Jason as a overly dirty rider. I just think he's willing to put it down to win. Question on his overall pace. So speaking of the heat race and the main, like not trying to take anything away from the guy. Great starts, great racecraft. Overall raw speed with what you said about the lap times and looking in the heat race, like, you know, you want it straight up, but in a sense, at times, like Jett had the pace to get around him and couldn't make it happen. That performance on the night, does it give you, or do you feel like, you know, Jason is meeting some of this preseason hype, or do you still feel like there's a little missing on the raw speed side of things?
Well, first of all, let me say that you said you didn't want to take anything away from Jett, and if there was one thing that I would like,
I meant Jason.
Okay,
I wasn't taking anything away from him.
Just let me go.
Okay.
You say you didn't want to take anything away from Jett, but if there's one thing that I would like to take away from Jett, it would be his Yoshimura pipe. Because I would love to have that on any bike that I own/operate. And thank you to Yoshimura for their support of this podcast. You too can make use of their power like Jett Lawrence, Hunter Lawrence, and Joe Shimoda by visiting yoshimura-rd.com. Anyway, back to what you wanted to talk about of Anderson. On press day, I was a little bit surprised. I said to him, what did I say? I said something along the lines of, based on what you've seen through 2 rounds, do you think that your goal of at least 1 win is obtainable or more obtainable than you expected? And he immediately said, yeah, I definitely think that I'm as good as I was last year. And it kind of stayed with me because if pushed, I believe I would say he's better than he was at this point last year.
Oh, yeah.
So it surprised me that he was like, so it wasn't like he thought about it. It was an instinct of like, yeah, I'm as good as I was last year. And I was like, okay. I think he's better.
And that's where I was having a tough one with how to, you know, word that thing for the main, because I think he is riding better, and I'm not trying to take away everything, but I was like, okay, like I could still argue that, you know, raw speed needs to be a little more competitive, like racecraft and starts are great, but yeah, push comes to shove. If you ask me if he's riding better than last year, I would undoubtedly say yes.
And the first time that he has started the season with multiple podiums in the first 3 rounds since his title-winning season of 2018. So there is that. But maybe that stat is a little bit skewed because Anderson always performs very well at Anaheim 1 and Anaheim 2, and Anaheim 2 more often than not as of late has been round 4. Yeah. So maybe that's why this 3-round stat exists, is my suspicion. But I asked this after Anaheim 1, and I think the same rings true now. Do we look at Jason Anderson and say, brilliant work, podium finishes, leading laps, this is amazing? Or do we look at Jason Anderson and say, these have been 2 brilliant opportunities to win main events, and I'm not sure that the stack of cards will lay out in this way, this positive way for you so much over the next 14 rounds? Essentially, should he have capitalized on these golden opportunities?
So when you asked me that after round 1, I undoubtedly said, yes, it feels like a missed opportunity because I was kind of doubting. I would say it. I was doubting, like, okay, could this potentially be his best race of the year? You know, some guys start out really well, like Barsha started seasons really well. Jason has a couple guys, so I labeled it as a missed opportunity. It's kind of funny now that it's reared its head a second time so early. Maybe not as much, because it's like, okay, you know, maybe he can put himself in this position. You know, this is his ability this year. He can put himself in this position a little bit more often. On one hand, I say missed opportunity because, like you said, it seemed like he had I would say I felt like his chances were higher based on how the heat race went and how well he was able to battle Jett. Just kind of missing on like I said, you touched on the track conditions as they came around, maybe missing evolving with them. But overall, I would lean off my A1 set answer and say it's not fully missed opportunity because he's been able to back himself into this position so early into the championship.
Well, if you remember the preview show, I was very high on Anderson, which means that I maybe view this in a different way because I expected more, therefore my perspective is different. So I don't know how I feel because I think I was so high on Anderson pre-season that I think pre-season, if you told me the main events would lay out in this way, for instance, Jason leading, what was it, 10 laps? More maybe? I think I would be like, yeah, he would take that, he would capitalize. So I don't know. And of course, it goes without saying, Jason is better West Coast than East, although last year, a lot of his, I don't want to say East Coast struggles because it wasn't that bad, but his East Coast dip was down to the new bike and them trying to get it to work better on soft dirt. He has also cited in multiple places that he feels as though the window is much bigger on the bike this year and they are better equipped to tackle different challenges. So perhaps we can expect this to continue. But I don't know. I still do feel as though these have been prime opportunities and opportunities that as Jett evolves, as Chase evolves, as Eli evolves, are not going to come around too often.
I'm curious because even the team's response afterwards, like, you know, there was photos where like Anderson immediately sat down on the top block and was talking with team manager Dan Fahey, and it was a very, very happy, pleasant talk between the two. Very much like we're moving in the right direction. Overheard a couple things they were saying. They were both very, very happy with how this season starting on. The overall team just seemed, you know, considering it's kind of funny. Usually a team that has, you know, something like that with another star guy with Prado going out would be a little bit more. And on the emotional side, everybody just seemed very stoked with the progress they're overall making with Jason at the moment. So well, at least it seems like they're confident it's moving in the right direction.
Okay, counter to that, I believe that happiness comes from the fact that this is a team that has not won since 2022. So for them, a podium is almost the greatest success that they have experienced in recent memory. So it is a reason to celebrate. Yeah. Whereas someone like HRC, Yamaha, KTM, it's like, oh, we're on the top step. That felt good 2 weeks ago. You know?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy recency bias though? Like, again, what you said, it seems so weird to talk about the Monster Energy Kawasaki 450 team in such a past tense of being a winner because of how dominant they've been, particularly in the 450 era of racing. I'd say even before, I mean, two-stroke, still they ended that era with Carmichael and then into Stu, but still, they've been so successful since we've gone to 450s. It is very weird to look at that team and be like, yeah, they're trying to build just to get back to getting a race win.
Well, yeah, they won at least one 450 main event every year from 2005 to 2022. And now here we are into the third year of a winless streak. And will it happen this year? It's certainly not a certainty. I think, how about this? Will it happen this year? Certainly not a certainty, but if you had to bet right now, are you betting on him winning one or not winning one?
I have a counter bet for you right after I answer this. This is very recency bias based on 2 rounds. I would put him. It's tough because we talked about his preseason. I think the 4 obvious winners are Jett Lawrence, Eli Tomac, Cooper Webb, and Chase Sexton for the season. The expanded list, Kenny and Anderson are on it. So I would say as of right now, I would bet on Jason winning a main, but it's a very 50-50 bet. Let's hear your answer, and I'll hit you with a counter. Who is more likely to get a win this year, Jason Anderson in Supercross or Jorge Prado in Pro Motocross on Cowie?
Oh, well, that's not even a question, is it? It's got to be Prado. Got to be. Because if Prado, again, all comes down to the perspective of expectation. If Prado doesn't win a race outdoors, we'll be burning the Cowie rig to the ground. Whereas if Anderson doesn't win a main event in Supercross, it's more like, well, it was always going to be tough, wasn't it? As far as will Anderson win a main event this year, I believe that now I want to go no, purely because I believe that my glass is half empty, based on what we've seen.
I feel like even though, like kind of off what I said, like on one hand, it's like, oh, we've had 2 opportunities. That means we're on a good track to make it more. Yours is we are not wasting, but we are spoiling the opportunities. We aren't maximizing.
Yeah, I don't know if this comes along again, essentially, which I think is fair. Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen with injuries and whatnot, but again, 2 golden opportunities. Speaking of golden and opportunity, Ken Roczen leads the 450SX points. The first time that Suzuki has had the red plate on the RMZ 450 in 3,655 days.
Was that the last time that Ken Roczen held a red plate for them? Or no?
Yes, Oakland 2015. Obviously, talking Supercross, not including outdoors. This is amazing, but is it surprising? Because although we completely discredited Roczen pre-season, there was very little talk. Roczen has started the season in this way pretty much every single year. So should we have just counted on him being a consistent force across the first couple of rounds? Probably.
That one's tough because I think we talked about this preseason. Like, we were kind of like, okay, we can see the pathway. We were kind of putting Jett on a mantle based off his Supercross results last year. And the questions were, can Tomac, can Webb, can Sexton rise to that occasion? And, with Chase, we were automatic yes and debated Webb and Tomac getting there. And I think we talked about this with Kenny. We didn't say no. It was just with Kenny, we just didn't. There were so many factors, support level with the team, his age, his health, many things like, can Kenny bridge that gap? We know he can do it for a race, but could he do it consistently? We kind of were on the fence. Like, it wasn't a yes, it wasn't a no. I do think it is really cool to see him do it, number one. But number two, I don't think any other era of Ken Roczen would have been happy with 2 second places to start the season. But he seems to be enjoying the process so much that, I don't know, I could see this carrying.
Well, he said in a press conference after the race that, and it was great of him to admit this, because I think we are all too scared to even bring it up or don't want to put him in that headspace, but it sounds like he's already there. He admitted that even now, Anaheim 2 is an awkward experience for him. It plays on his mind all day. He feels a little anxious, a little different. So for him to, get a great result in a second place, where he truthfully had the potential to win the main event, had he maybe made some moves quicker, could have gone with Jett immediately.
Well, did you see the one where he had the move on? Was he still ahead of Jett? Was it the one where he tried to make the move after the start straight and he got the move on Hunter and had enough drive to get Jett, and then fubbered? He missed a single over table or something. He clipped. He had the drive. Like, he was definitely being so explosive at the beginning.
I can't remember, but yeah, for him to get the result and also the red plate at an event that is so cursed in his mind, you can completely imagine. You can completely imagine the feeling. And also, let's not forget, rewind 2 years ago when he is now just starting out on a Suzuki with what was HEP. no one at all expected him to have success. No one at that point would have expected him to still be racing in 2025. This is against all odds and against all expert opinions. This is defying everything for both the team, the manufacturer, and Kenny. So you can imagine the elation.
Which do you feel like is more surprising if you were to go back to, the announcement of when he signed originally with HEP? The fact that he would be racing 3 years later still, or the fact that he would still be racing with HEP Suzuki 3 years later? Because I think a lot of us in the time definitely saw it as a 1 year pass through. Not that it was like, oh, he's for sure only going to be there 1 year, but it was very much he just needs to get through this year and see where his career is at and what options are available. It didn't seem like this is a long-term, relationship.
I disagree. I felt at the time and still feel now that now the landscape has changed a little bit, but at the time it felt like there was no other option, and until he retired, this was going to be his spot. And now obviously there are other options as Triumph come in, as Ducati come in, etc., etc. But he certainly made this team and manufacture his own. And again, I think Dustin Pipes hates it when he hears me reference this, but pre-Kenny, when HEP had Cunningham, Brees, and Enticknap, tell me
that
that
was first year. That was
no, that's this is later. This is I think COVID year or 2021. Because Brees was filling in for Anstey, so this would have been 2020. But you tell me that team has the red plate in 450SX, and I'm like, mind blown. Yeah. So, again, incredible all around. Full credit to Kenny, full credit to the team, full credit to Dustin, full credit to Larry Brooks, full credit to Suzuki, I guess. I'm sure they've done something at some point. I'm sure that in Japan, somewhere, there's a man who has just got a bonus. Maybe.
The one that's impressed me, it's so funny looking at everybody else's track record. The couple years he's been there, we've seen KTM go through a generational change on a bike that wasn't popular and literally did a mid-generation frame change. You have Honda adapting to a new platform that was elated at first, but now has, I wouldn't say struggles, just they're learning it, the setup. Tomac during this generation has gone, the Star Yamaha group has gone through a generational change on the 450. Here's Kenny on the Suzuki, no options, no frames, no swing arms, nothing that the rest of these guys have been through, all this stuff, and they just keep making it work, and they keep chiseling away and making the platform better, and all these guys have had so many options up and down the block of what they could run between those 3 years, and Kenny's still on that platform, just plugging away.
Still up in the air whether we see the electric start at some point this year as well. I think it's certainly possible. It's just a risk versus reward thing. And it obviously depends how big that risk is as we get into the second half of the season. If they continue like this, it in one way puts pressure on the fact that maybe you want to eliminate the risk of a Kickstarter, but it also puts pressure on the fact that you don't want to rock the boat and unnecessary upheaval. It's also worth mentioning that the red plate on a Suzuki is superior to any other look, just works brilliantly. And Kenny's Fox gear, blue on a Suzuki, also superior. Blue with yellow is just can't be beaten.
It's so good.
Simply can't be beaten, nor can Fox Racing with a rich heritage and deep racing DNA. Fox Racing has been at the forefront of motocross for 50 years. They empower the world's best athletes like Jorge Prado, Ken Roczen, Levi Kitchen, and Joe Shimoda to chase their dreams. With their gear, dreamers become champions. They honor the past while inventing tomorrow, pushing the limits of racewear and protection. Because at Fox, change is the only constant. Shop their new elevated future limited edition collection by visiting foxracing.com. On to Chase, unless you have something else to say about Kenny.
Nope.
So Chase was sick all week. I think at this point, I was trying to work it out, but to my knowledge, of the top 450 guys, it's just Jett and Eli who have escaped sickness. Because Anderson, Roczen, Hunter, Chase... Webb.
Yeah. AP.
AP, yep. So, and And then, okay, Mookie and Barsha, but I'm talking like title contender.
No,
bracket.
it's still what you're saying. Like, you go through the field. I mean, I heard multiple guys reference it this weekend. Still, this flu has decimated the riders, the mechanics, and the whole industry in the last month. You either had it before A1, you had it at A1, or you had it this last week.
Yeah, no one seems to know what it is or why it lingers so much. That seems to be the overarching theme. Every rider who has had it is like, yeah, I expect it to be better 4 days later, and it's been 2 weeks, and I just still feel off. And being the investigative journalist that I am, I jumped into the virus myself pre-season to really understand the situation. So
just
I can
go head first.
Yep, just so I can, relate to the riders and really understand what they're going through. And let me tell you, it is absolutely horrific. In every way. In fact, on press day, when Chase was telling me about how he had it, I explained that I had it, and he said, "Oh, so like talk me through how it goes. Like, am I going to be better soon?" And I was like, "Do you want me to be positive or do you want me to be true?" And he was like, "No, tell me the truth." And I was like, "Oh, you're fucked. Like, this is bad." I was like, "I'm still not great now." And even Anderson said, obviously, he was very sick at San Diego, but he said he was still feeling the effects at Anaheim too. So, it's not ideal. So Chase was off for that reason. He was in bed from Tuesday night to Friday morning. Early in the main event, he was very good, very competitive. Clearly, in my eyes, the fastest in the whoops. Looked incredibly stable and just brilliant in the whoops, but the bike setup got away from him in the second half, and that prompted the mistakes that we saw, especially in the whoops, which kind of slowed his charge somewhat. He got it together towards the end, but the bike setup got away from him quite drastically. I think he was still in high spirits after the race, as I think he should be. Spun like crazy after the grate as he hit the dirt for the first time, so that was why he had a bad start. He's not concerned about that, despite the fact that I was concerned about that. So that's fine, I guess. Just blaming the weather. And yeah, I think that Chase is still positive, and we're moving on to Glendale with this renewed energy that we had at Anaheim 1 with no concern. So that's good, right?
Very good. There's not much to say. You covered it.
Okay, well, the good news is, not only does Chase Sexton use Decal Works, which is great news for Chase because it ensures that he is looking amazing each and every week, which, as we all know, is very important to Chase. Even better news is that Decal Works and Chase and Lewis all partner on these post-race interviews, which include everyone, Decal Works, Chase, and Lewis. So it's a brilliant little family. And the reviews are in. Best interviews in the game. Sexton and you need a podcast together at this point. Favorite interview combo ever. The connection is just funny. And this is what Decal Works is involved in. This speaks. It's imperative. My point is, it's imperative to communicate that this doesn't happen without Decal Works. So not only is Decal Works contributing to the look and performance of Chase Sexton on the track, it's also contributing to Chase Sexton off the track, and in a domino effect, Lewis. So, to bring this whole thing together, Decal Works is overarching, controlling the entire sport, and if you want to do anything in life, you need to head to decalmx.com, is essentially where this little train is heading. And I think that now everyone fearing for their life and well-being will be running to decalmx.com and placing an order, because quite clearly it's just frightening to not be involved. I certainly feel blessed that I can say that I'm connected to Decal Works. And back in the room.
The train has finally reached the station, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why. Honestly, just to bring it back, really works well for Decal Works that I have to do a read about them, but they also sponsor Chase, because it just it really makes it easy. It just go.
We ever going to point this out with Juju, or it's a Chase only phenomenon?
It just doesn't work. It doesn't sound as authentic, does it? Coming from me, if I'm like, oh, Juju, no. But no, seriously, actually, please go and watch the Chase Sexton interview on the Vital MX YouTube, the same channel where you're potentially watching this, because you'll learn very little about Anaheim 2. In fact, you may learn nothing about Anaheim 2, but you will learn other stuff, and it's an alternative look at a professional racer. is kind of how I'm starting to pitch this. So head there after you've done with this. There's no other journalist deep diving the 12 different films that Chase watched while he was sick this week. So that's the content that's waiting for you. Anyway, so Hunter was 5th in San Diego, 5th at Anaheim 2. I was pondering what ride I like better, and I was really struggling, but I believe I have come to the conclusion that I liked the San Diego ride better. You?
Where do you start in? Where was he at first lap in San Diego? Was he farther back or?
No, I think he was ahead, wasn't he? I think both starts were actually quite similar.
Yeah.
Hard to tell in his chaotic 450 SX class.
Well, solid. I lean with you. I slightly lean towards the San Diego ride.
But again, he was sick in San Diego, and he basically had no bike time this week. I don't know if you can say that was 100% Hunter, but similar to Jett in the same vein, for him to have rebounded from Anaheim 1 with 5-5 scores, brilliant. And let's now, through the power of hindsight, not forget he was actually 4th at Anaheim 1 when he crashed. So potentially with 4.55, and that is, I think, a brilliant start to the season. So,
keeping that all in mind, how long till the podium? Do we see it as early as this week in Glendale? Once we go east to Tampa?
It's so hard to say because Chase and Eli have one podium each. So, like, clearly the podium is just this anything goes, no rules, no rhythm, no rhyme or reason. Just throw feces at the wall and see what sticks.
Most people say darts, but I don't know where turn into a monkey.
Well, no, I was going to say the swear word, but I'm trying to make an effort to be more professional.
Okay, I don't know.
The saying is throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. Wall,
yeah. Okay, so it's like.
And now I've said it, so I'm going to have to wait until next week to be more professional. But no, again, nice rebound for Hunter, and you look at his best lap time, and it's very competitive with Lawrence, with Jett, Roczen, and Chase. So I see no issue there. Justin Cooper is a much more interesting debate because, to recap his night, the heat race was perhaps the worst he has ever ridden in his career. When I tell you that I was sat in the press box pondering his future options in life, his career options, where it goes from here, I was like, this is officially an absolute disaster. So for him to rebound and turn it around to what he did in the main event, yes, if you're negative, perhaps you would say that he fell back outside of the top 5 after leading laps and he's a factory rider, but baby steps, I feel like this was a very, very important moment in his 450 career just to see some progress. So I think that I'm on the positive side of this one. Where are you?
3 things stand out to me. 1, I'm actually impressed with the LCQ ride. Don't mean to be a dick, but the heat went so bad, I actually was like, I don't know if he's going to make it out of the LCQ at the rate we're going here. The heat race was that bad. Yes, it was super nice to see him start up front. You know, we got, I guess, a little used to that in outdoors last year. He had multiple races where ran up front, ran with leaders, and it was kind of like one of those, okay, you know, his time is coming. So even though he has led a lap in Supercross, what was it, like St. Louis last year or something, it was nice to see him get up there and get a couple in. A little bummed at falling back, but considering how bad it was going early or in the day, I think the rebound is quite good. I would love to ask him what in the heck happened to his whoop skills, though. I think he was jumping even in practice. Yeah. I mean, came around, like, I guess one thing I'll give props, he practiced jumping so much early that it sort of worked in the main, but there were times in practice and even in the heats, I'm like, why is J Coop like the only... It's only because of the Yamaha thing, and just from a glance, the first time I saw him do it, I'm like, wow, Webb's already jumping the whoops this early in the morning. Oh, Jesus, that's J Coop.
Well, between the heat race ride and jumping the whoops, that just tells me that mentally, confidence-wise, it's far off-piste. Which also tells me that perhaps the main event has really done him a lot of favors in that department. Perhaps. It's kind of, again, maybe I'm overly positive with this whole thing, but I feel like that main event ride was much, much, much needed. Almost, it was a lifeline, if I want to be that drastic.
Even after what I would say after practice, if you would have come back and told me that Jacob, Tomac, and Webb are going to finish back to back to back, and Jacob's going to be the best of the three, I would have been like, how many? They all fall down in the first corner?
I have to admit, early in the main event, I was fully cheering for a Jacob win because that would have encapsulated the ultimate crazy result.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I just was like, this would be brilliant to just like leave here and be like, how did that happen? But alas, we ended up with a Jett Lawrence win, which is far less surprising and much easier to understand. But for a moment, I was allowing myself to believe that a Jacob win was on the horizon. So Tomac, this truly perplexes me because the riding was great, the speed was great. However, with the riding and speed that I saw, I would have expected better progress. So I don't really know how those 2 points can coexist.
Yeah.
I don't know where I am. Like, on one hand, I want to say Eli was incredible. But on the other hand, I want to say, why didn't that really work?
I agree with you because qualifying, I thought was phenomenal. Him and Jett went toe to toe, and even the lap that he went to, final lap, he went to go back after Jett's time. His session started out great, ended up losing it in a corner. Seemed frustrated very much because I think he knew he was on a good one. So qualifying times were good throughout the day. Heat race was good. Just to see it not go anywhere in the main was perplexing because even at the start, like a few people talk about, so off the start was super weird because I was shooting from that side. He had a decent jump, and then just right about the time where you come to the tunnel, he just spun and shot in front of the tunnel. So he came out of the first corner in 20th. There was only 2 guys behind him. I mean, he made pretty quick work to get to Barsha. I know he was up to 16th within a lap or something. He was to Barsha, he was 11th, Barsha 10th, I think, within a few laps of that, and then just stalled out. And I was perplexed, again, shooting photos, I'd see the leaders go by, shoot for a second. I'd look around going, okay, Eli picked anybody off this lap. And I was just like, did not compute seeing him stuck there for that many laps, considering all the other good points in the day. So at the end of the race, I was very conflicted. Like, okay, am I still like, yes, this is good. Like Eli's here. Like Eli is here on speed in a sense. Like the Eli of old, when you see him riding, it's great. But the result is also a classic Eli where I'm just baffled. Like I don't have an explanation, a reason.
The best way to maybe sum it up is lap 5, he was 10th. At lap 16, he was 9th. So
it literally took him 6-7 laps to get Barsha, and then he sat with Webb forever as well.
Is it possible that this was just a tough track to pass on? I don't really feel that way, but then the results and the way the race is played out, perhaps the weather, kind of lead me to think that actually this was quite tough to pass on. I mean, it shouldn't have been. There was a lot of bowl turns, 2 sets of whoops, sand. There was a lot of options out there. But again, look at the lap charts. There was a lot of, especially in the second half of the 450 main, not a lot of movement.
I could kind of agree with you there. I think, the one downside we get to, I was talking about some of the bigger rhythms. Like this is kind of one of those pat on the back to the top 10. I thought everybody was riding fairly well, like section to section watching. Like that, again, this is what was confusing me a little bit about watching Eli. I watched Eli for a couple laps in the middle of the race, and my, test of the eye would have been, he's going to go forward. He looks like he's riding well. And it just, again, stalled out in a weird way.
Yeah, certainly.
Like Webb looked good. Hunter looked good. They all look good.
Certainly in the main event, at one moment, I thought to myself, is this a weird Eli ride? Is this one of those? But I don't think it was. But again, just hard, the puzzle pieces that I have do not fit together. All of the pieces are true. All of the pieces are factual. But for some reason, they just don't stick together. And that's confusing for me. You mentioned Cooper Webb. I interviewed him after the race. He was bummed. Like, he was not happy in the slightest. It just wasn't there. He was off all day. Anaheim 2 is typically great for him, so I believe that maybe heightened expectations, maybe made it tougher to swallow. It's not the end of the world. I mean, look at everyone has kind of had this bad result, apart from Kenny. But yeah, he was, dare I say, distraught with this. Like, I heard him say to multiple people, including myself, it just wasn't there from the start of the day to the end of the day. Corner speed, rhythm speed, jump speed, everything was just a tiny bit off, and it almost like he couldn't put his finger on it. But he did admit that the time he missed in December hurt him with testing because he didn't get to test some stuff, but also in the same breath, he was so comfortable last year that maybe he's been too stubborn and not allowed himself to experiment because he felt like what he had was good enough, and maybe now he needs to step outside of the box a little bit. And of course, stepping outside of that box into the wonderful world of Yamaha Motor USA and all of the wonderful things, solutions, and options that they can provide is not only amazing for Cooper Webb, Eli Tomac, Justin Cooper, it's also amazing for you, the listener. So why don't you head and explore the wide range of what Yamaha has to offer and get involved and be Eli Tomac's teammate, which is not something that you can say often. Over to you.
No, I agree. What you said about Webb was interesting because I think it was A1 he mentioned that was, he has been very stubborn. Basically, he keeps defaulting to, what does he call it, his round 6 setting from last year or something they did with Gilly. He said they've tried other stuff, and he said he just kept feeling like, I'm comfortable. I kept going back to this. Like, it was good last year. It was good. And even hearing him say that, on one hand, I'm like, okay, good for a rider that can, on one hand, be aware enough to be like, no, we don't need to chase our tail. I'm comfortable here. Like, on the other hand, though, if you believe what the riders say, like, everything's always progressing. It's always progressing so much. When you compare that to Webb's comment, you're kind of like, well, okay, is it bad to be stubborn and just be like, no, I'm fine. Like, I ran this. Because it's, again, Moto, I feel like, operates on such a narrow look into the future and, like, time path. Like, something that's a year ago seems so far away. When he says round 6 last year, I'm like, wow, that was a while ago. We haven't found anything better by now?
Yeah, I think it's human nature, though, isn't it, to just get comfortable. Yeah. What is the old saying? I can't remember it. I've forgotten the old saying. Next week, I will have the old saying, which is actually very relevant to this situation. I can't even have a stab at it because I really don't have that in my head right now. Something about where you're safe is where you're comfortable, but it also is restrictive. Something like that.
That sounds so great, Lewis.
It's fine. Jumping down a little bit and kind of wrapping up 450s. Nice ride for Malcolm. He was just ahead of Barsha. I didn't speak to Barsha, but I did see him communicating with the team after the main event, in gear, head in hands, and it looked like a man that had a lot on his mind, is all I'm going to say. I looked at him and I was like, I felt like the main event was quite okay. Without speaking to him, he does not. There was a lot on that man's mind. He may even still be there contemplating. So,
who are you talking about, Malcolm or Justin?
Barsha.
Oh, Barsha. You know what's funny is, what did he get last weekend? 6? Or was that A1?
Let me tell you. He got
in A1.
8. 6-8 through the first 2 rounds.
6-8.
So 6-8-10.
Sorry, so A1 reminded me that, like, he got 6, he battled Tomac till the very end, was running 5th, and I think we talked about last week, like, I was considering how last year went. I thought, very good start to the season. He was kind of the same way, like, not as, like, full head buried hands, but, helmet off, kind of, like, over the bars and just, like, kind of mumbling to himself, the contemplation. I was like, this guy is hard on himself because compared to last year, that was a great ride. But even all the way back at A1, he kind of had that feeling about him a little bit.
Jumping all the way down, Dylan Ferrandis was 16th, but looked, dare I say, the best I've seen him look on a Supercross track in a very, very, very long time early in the main event. Chase got by him early. Then a couple of laps later, Dylan was very, very close to passing Chase back. He was, again, dare I say, the best I've seen him on a Supercross track since the 250 days? Maybe that's a stretch, but honestly, that good and that notable of an improvement. So that's good.
Note from one of the FC guys, they said this last week that Dylan said, and they put this in explanation in the report because we all know, Dylan's a little infamous for always having a comment about the bike. His comment last week is, the bike is sick right now. So the report has sick in capital letters. Dylan was amongst also the sick train. He is amongst the Florida group that was also ill this week. So Again, I'm always a big backer of the Phoenix guys, but Dylan did, for his situation also being ill, I thought he rode fantastic. Sucked that him and Aaron got together in the main, though.
And poor Aaron Plessinger, who, okay, this was kind of his doing. So I was going to say can't catch a break, but kind of his doing. Despite that, not a good start to the season in any way, shape, or form. And although he was happy to do an interview after the race, it was not the bubbly Aaron that I've come to know. So he needs a break. He needs a good Glendale, and I don't know if that will come, but he needs to break this streak and just have a 8th place, and that'll put him on a track to positivity.
I hate to say because he's had such a rough opening 3 rounds. Even in like practice qualifying, like I haven't paid attention to him a lot. You know, outside of the luck in the race, how's the rest looked? Again, this is a man who got his first win last year and is just in a weird place right now.
Well, similar to Dylan, I did feel like in the early laps of the main event, he looked good, aggressive, moving forward. He looked like he could have latched on to Chase and gone with the lead group. I did feel that. And maybe I kind of put this to him after the race and he wasn't really picking up what I was putting down. But I kind of said, like, I feel like you saw the opportunity to do something great. And after the start of the season, you were so keen to grab that and right the wrongs that you did something dumb. That's kind of how I feel like the main event played out. But anyway, yeah, really, really not good for Aaron. And any hopes of a solid championship position have kind of already gone out the window. Now it's just about individual results and rebuilding. Before we move on from 450s, 2 notes that I wanted to make but completely missed as we shuffle through. Jett Lawrence, not fastest in any sector, which means very little, but it's still surprising. Who would have thought? And my other point, I didn't look into this a lot, but I had a look for 2 seconds and I was surprised how much this jumped out at me. If you look at Roczen's 450 career results, you can really pinpoint round 8 each year as the moment where it starts to drop. And I have no idea what this is, even pre-arm injury. In all of his years on a 450, he has been on the podium at round 8 twice. These are his round 8 results. 1, 18, 6, 4, 2, 4, 13, 7, 5. And if you were to break up pre-round 8 and post-round 8, each season, the podium count pre-round 8 versus post-round 8 is drastically higher. So I need to look into this more, but round 8 really seems to be a sticking point for Kenny. So watch this space as well. Anything else on 450s, or are we moving on?
Just a little props to the beta guys. Mitchell and Benny are just been solid so far at the beginning of this year. 12-13 in the mains. I think Benny had to come through the LCQ. I believe Mitchell was straight out of his heat, but compared to last year with the ups and downs, with Colt, just nice solid showing for those guys.
Yeah, and I also feel like they can be a lot better. Really good results so far. 12-13 is great, but from what I've seen from both Benny and Mitchell, I genuinely believe they have the potential to be even stronger, which is great for those guys, yeah. And as you say, this time last year was disastrous, and this is quite the turnaround just 1 year later. On to 250s.
I was going to say another little note is also, I think we saw last year that Benny could ride the bike good. I also think another big nod to the team is Mitchell performing as well as he is this early in the season. He's done good on a 450 when he was with MCR, but those always kind of felt like a 13th for him felt like more like a mid-season result,
Yeah.
At the field thinned out a little bit. So I also think that's a big bonus from I think we all know that Benny after last year could ride the bike well. So to see that from Mitchell being right there is another big nod to them.
On to 250s, where similar to the 450 narrative, the rider who we all expected to win finally got his act together and got to the top of the podium. Are you now full steam on the Haiden Deegan train and believe that this is just trending in a Deegan direction and he will soon have the red plate and ultimately the championship? Or are you still convinced that the race is on?
I'm convinced the race is on between him and Juju. We talked about last week. I said, Yeah, Haiden Star Group, his team, they'd get together. Not a shock that he came out and won at A2. I think the interesting part was, and I'm not trying to start anything, like a little on the aggressive side with his racing, which is fine. Just the fact that like he won, but it wasn't dominant. I thought Juju rode very well all day. I think Juju wasn't as good as the opening 2 rounds, but was still right there with him, to the point that I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for a championship battle between these two. I really think they're both riding really well. I think the bigger question for me in the title hunt is if Jordan can go with him. Jordan kind of went not as bad as before, but we had a Jordan mistake again last night and lost the group a little bit. How will that trend next week before we go into a break? Can Jordan kind of right the ship and go with those two, or are Haiden and Juju going to separate themselves a little bit?
Just copy and paste all that I said about Jett. Right now, I'm convinced there is still a race. But if Deegan comes out and wins in Glendale, I'm certainly going to be like, okay, maybe this is just what we always expected, saw coming. But you're right. It wasn't Juju's best result of the season, or ride, sorry. But if you look at it, 2-1-2 to start the season is amazing and likely better than anyone would have expected from Julien Beaumer. So you can't lose sight of that. And he has a red plate and he's got a nice buffer of 7 points, I believe. So all great. Just kind of, I guess I almost feel like Juju is a sitting duck and dependent on what Deegan does. Because if Deegan does what we believe Deegan can do, that'll be tough for Juju. But if Deegan doesn't do what we expect Deegan to do, a la the first 2 rounds, then much more realistic for Juju to take this thing.
One other note I'll props to Hayden's part is I think a decent turnaround. Not qualifying was bad, he was second, but if you really watched the last time practice, like it was a very weird, I'm not trying to start anything, like Haiden kept backing up Juju on their time lapse a lot, like on their off laps. He kept trying to back up into Juju's pace a little bit, which was really weird. They would both roll around a lot and try to keep away from each other. So a little bit of the kind of mind game stuff going on. And then Juju put up the good time. And I think, did Haiden do it twice or 3 times? Or right at the end, he tried to set to retake the fast lap and he made a mistake and like slid out or shot off a section. Like he kind of go from this really low roll pace to try to send and just couldn't quite execute. And I was kind of after a race, I was talking to somebody who's actually been fairly close to him that was kind of concerned too. Like, man, it kind of seemed like he got in his own head a little bit, but then turned it around come race time, no problem.
Yeah, Haiden had a super, super sloppy practice. Mistake upon mistake upon mistake. And at that point, I was almost convinced that the train is off the tracks.
Yeah.
Juju is the man, and Deegan needs to get it together. So I'd be very interested to know how he got it together, because cannot understate just how reckless this thing was in timed practice. But yeah, hey, he got it together. Maybe based on how good Deegan was, maybe I was a little bit surprised how close Juju was at the end, because the gap grew quite quickly early on and then just kind of sat there, and maybe that's to Deegan's credit. Maybe he was managing the situation. Yeah. But I felt as though it was trending in a direction of Deegan is just going to destroy everyone here.
Yeah, I definitely thought that after the heat and then the way the main had started, I was like, okay, he's going to run away. But Juju, and maybe it was kind of like either, like I said, either 1-2 things, either Haiden managing the gap, or as the track conditions came into play, as the rain came down, maybe Juju adapted just a little bit better. Only ultimately Haiden can answer that where he was at pace-wise, but it's still, that's why I say the race is on. The end of the race was, not a big gap. I think those two, by far the standouts here, of course. That's one of the most obvious things to say. If you're in Juju's situation or, viewing his situation, again, Haiden was pretty aggressive in the heat, pretty aggressive in the main with him. I think Haiden has, no qualms racing like that, wants to win, plain and simple. Does Juju kind of have to get the elbows up and sort of, put it back to him in a sense to solidify that he can't be pushed around? Or does Juju just plug away with, I just got to be faster, who cares? Or in a sense to be, just not pushed around, does he need to put up a little bit more of a fight?
I feel like he's been putting up enough of a fight. No, I don't like. Don't get me wrong. I think Juju's been putting up enough of a fight. I feel like there were a couple of moments at A2 where he was aggressive. I don't want to, like, nothing crazy, but I don't feel like he's been what's the word?
A pushover.
Yeah, that's the one. I don't feel like he's been a pushover. I feel like that's been fairly consistent, and I think that's why Deegan has put so much of a focus on Juju, as he's like, oh god, I'm going to have to up my ante with my comments, etc., to push this guy down because he's not relinquishing to my initial attack. But yeah, Glendale will be telling, and believe it or not, after Glendale, we're on to the East Coast. That has happened in the blink of an eye. I actually cannot believe how quickly this thing is going. Cole Davies was third, his first 250 podium. Not a surprise at all, and honestly, I don't have much to say. The first of many. He rides great. His technique is brilliant. The way he positions the bike, the way he sets up turns, I like all of that. He's very fluid. I mean, it was a little bit of a gift, but good for Cole.
I'd say level of improvement over a 2-year period is nuts for him. I remember seeing him at Arlington 2 years ago in Futures, and I swear he was probably like 5'2", maybe weighed 115 pounds. And the bike basically rode him every inch of the track, but he would send it and try. Then coming out last year on the gas program, heavily improved, but still not in the most control at times, but definitely the improvement then even this year is just huge. Like I said, he does not look like a rookie racing. His bike placement, lack of mistakes, control, poise on the bike, racecraft is pretty solid so far. Just very calm, cool, and collected, which kind of sells me on the fact that, yes, I think he gets a win this year. I think it's coming. It's just going to take a start because I do think, he definitely, to pull win, once he gets the start, he's got to maybe get just a little bit more intensity, but I think his ability to manage the pace will be fine and control the race if he's able to put himself in that position.
I mean, without doubt, this goes without saying, but the decision to put him pro obviously was the right one.
Oh yeah, 100%. It definitely makes me look at, the other person that raced tonight that raced with him last year, Drew. It's like, look at the difference in Cole, who was, I would say last year Cole was a little better, but there was definitely some parity between the two. You have Cole, who was set up by the team to go pro this year, prepared properly, and has gone racing, and look how it's turned out, versus Drew's program that's been, a little bit more wait and see. Let's see if we're going to put him in. And that's not taking me. We'll get to Drew. I still think Drew's first night, for some of the circumstances we'll talk about, was solid. But I mean, look at the difference between him and Cole right now already.
Yeah, right. No, this is great. Great acquisition by Star. Great decision to put in pro. And yeah, jumping down, obviously Jordan, we know, crashed on the last lap. Would have been third, ended up fourth. Cody Shock. I'm going to put this to you, and you may not like this. Don't know how you'll handle this, but here we go. We know that his improvement in Supercross has been drastic and brilliant. Fair?
Yes.
Okay. But at what point do we start to not criticize, but with the nature of the current West Coast, the amount of riders injured, I would have expected Cody to be closer to the podium, is my point. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if we now start to criticize and be like, the consistency is great, but I guess you just put it down to raw pace, is that not there? Are we missing that?
That's pretty much how he felt after the race, honestly, talking to him. Like, he was, of course, excited about his heat race win, but he knows in the main that he said he still feels like he needs to break. Like, he was kind of talking about trying to like break over the hurdle of just not worrying about, I have to make it through a main, just as blunt as it is, turn the brain off and send it a little more. He knows he's missing that pace, and he was definitely disappointed in his main result. Yeah, I know he wants to be closer to that podium group. I know last weekend he named off, whatever his time last week was from him to the leader was the smallest it had ever been in his career, but I think it went the other direction this week. I had to look at the finish time, but he's aware. He definitely, for a guy that came off a heat race win, he wasn't terribly stoked on that main event.
Yeah, I guess my point is, I believe that you can quite easily fall into the trap of looking and going, top 5 for Cody Shock? That's great. Good job. But maybe now we start to look a little deeper. And we start to criticize and pick apart at it.
Joe behind him with the injury. It is a light field. Definitely, I think it's a fair criticism.
Drew Adams, you alluded to him. Got the call up on Friday. It sounds like originally they were going to wait for Glendale, but he kind of pushed to get on the line at Anaheim too. Steady day. I think it was fine. Obviously, he didn't set the world on fire, but considering how unnatural the start to his career is, where he doesn't know when he's racing, he doesn't know where he's racing, he's kind of just preparing for something. That can't be easy at all, and I sympathise with that. So great to see him out there, and great to see him get a solid result to start this thing.
Yeah, I think it'd be easy to also criticize and be like, oh, he should have been a little more fit, a little more hanging there. But to give you an idea of, or the listener an idea of how his week went, he flew in Thursday, I believe, at like noon and went straight to the test track. We were not here Thursday morning logging laps. He got in midday, pretty much landed, went straight to the Cowie track midday, knocked out a couple sessions that afternoon. They went to the shop. My understanding is Mitch was like, no, let's just wait for Glendale. And he was pushing like, no, I want to race. So they went back out the next day on Friday. I actually joked with somebody in Cowie because I saw a helmet on Friday for him. And I went to somebody, I was like, is he racing tomorrow? And they're like, well, and I'm like, let me guess. He's at the track riding right now. They're like, yeah, he basically went out Friday, did a bunch of motos, convinced Mitch, he was ready to race. Yeah, a lot of guys don't come off a plane ride Thursday, Friday, and then go race that weekend. So give him a little bit of a break there.
What's up with Marchbanks? Because I thought he broke his shoulder.
I don't know, because when I asked for an update on him, what was it, on Wednesday, when we were kind of trying to figure out if Drew was racing or not, I was told, hey, we haven't put anything because we don't know if he's racing or not this weekend. So I said, is the injury major or not? And they were like, I got this very vagueness on how hurt he is or not, and I still don't fully understand how hurt he is.
Well, in my interview after the race, Drew said that Marchbanks could be back this weekend. So I'm confused. Because what injury rules you out for one weekend? Especially a shoulder injury. A shoulder is fairly cut and dry of like, oh, you injured your shoulder? Bye.
Yeah, that's again why I'm lost. And trust me, as usual, one of my mutual friends there, I'm always giving them a little bit of teasingness about their PR situation. I've never been so confused by an OEM in my life.
Yeah, I don't know. But so Marchbanks will be back quite soon, it sounds like.
I would say by at least Arlington.
Yeah. So Adams is definitely still racing because Masterpool is out. But if Masterpool comes back, Adams is then out again. So just because Adams has started his career, this is in no way like, and you're pro, here we go, you're locked in. Which again, I really sympathise with him because on one hand, you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself when you go pro. You don't want to carry the burden of expectation. But when you know you've got a ticking time bomb to prove yourself, prove your worth, achieve your personal goals, and you don't actually know when that clock is going to expire, that's difficult to manage. Like, I really sympathise with the mental toing and froing of this situation. So, there's a chance that Adams gets benched again at some point in Supercross, but the logical decision would be to tell Masterpool to wait until outdoors. That would be the most logical, simple decision ever. So I would bet on that with zero information because why wouldn't you do that?
I could still see Masterpool coming back, but I think Drew's future is in his own hands. If he shows big improvement at Glendale, then you go, okay, we're taking him racing, not Masterpool, and you bench him. Here's the weird one. With an 8th, that ties them for their season best result with Marchbanks, which I know somebody under the truck made that joke to Mitch after they were kind of bummed. And it was like, this is as good as Garrett did in his one of his 2 races. So, I think Drew will improve. I think, again, I think his future is in his own hands. I think it depends how he performs if they decide to bench Masterpool for the rest of Supercross and let Drew go, which, if they do, in a sense, quote-unquote bench Masterpool, I cannot wait to read the social comments after the people, again, I complain about this, that were saying that that PC cost him a run at a title by moving him off east to west.
Well,
see how that goes.
I would bench Master Pool until outdoors. Makes so much sense. So much sense. Just do that. Like, why wouldn't you?
We skipped over Shimoda, but man, again, the field is a bit depleted, but I was still impressed with the 6th place because probably similar to me, you saw him in practice. I don't know if I actually saw him put together a real complete lap in practice.
But that was by design. He was saving himself, but also didn't take any painkillers or medication at all until just before the heat race. So the pain was a lot higher in practice. I don't know why he saved it all until the heat race. I'm guessing because you can only take a certain amount. But yeah, I'm surprised that he's only 13 points down on the red plate. Like, I would have expected him to be well clear of 20 back by now. So I don't know how. Again, another situation where I'm looking at the points and I'm like, this math isn't mathing for me.
Yeah.
But there you go. I wanted to give a tip of the hat to Parker Ross, who was very, very good. Fell around the halfway mark, I want to say.
Nope. Just held his breath.
What do you mean?
I asked the team. They say he didn't fall. They just said he went backwards.
Was that the heat then? I definitely saw him fall after the whoops. But maybe it was the heat. Oh.
Because in the main he was 5th and then 6th for quite a while, and then he literally just basically blew up. He held his breath and had to roll for like 2 laps, which just doubling stuff because he just anxiety. Got a little static about his running position.
I want to check the facts on this because lap 10 he did a 105 and lap 11 he did a 115, which certainly seems like a crash.
Okay, maybe he did slide. I asked the team what was wrong. I said, when did he crash? And they just texted me back and said he held his breath.
Well, maybe that's why he crashed. And he also lost 2 positions on that lap with the 115. Hold on.
Is there a sector you can find?
Yes, he must have crashed because where I saw him crash in the corner after the first set of whoops, on the 115 lap, his sector time was 6 seconds slower.
Well, they're mine.
So I feel like he did crash, but still showed a lot of potential. Great work, amazing ride. I feel like he would have opened a lot of eyes with that and definitely sparked some interest.
Yep.
Anything else 250 wise?
Enzo Lopes' night was weird, but one we'll touch on, me and you were talking about pre-show, is, we had a slew of injuries this week, and we've touched on Marchbanks and Masterpool. Ryder DeFrancesco got hurt late in the week, and after talking to a few, because that was another one, kind of a very vague PR, after talking to a few people this weekend, get well sooner Ryder, he's got quite the injury list from my understanding. Elbow, ribs, potentially sternum, intestine damage, it sounds like multiple broken vertebrae, and some of them are in the C area, like the neck. It sounds like I know he's, as of yesterday, he's still in the hospital, and I believe from what I heard, he will be through the early part of next week. So big bummer for him. Contract year, really was performing well over the first 2 rounds, and that's a big enough injury list that doesn't sound like he's coming back anytime soon.
Yeah, sad. And simply because based on his rides through the first 2 rounds, one of the most interesting stories to me that I was really keen to follow was his evolution. So that obviously it sucks, but it sucks all round. And I would hope that a lot of people would have had their eyes opened by the first 2 rounds. And obviously it's Ryder D. We know what he's capable of. We know how great he is or great he can be. This is just a bump in the road. Well, quite a major bump in the road, but he'll be back and he'll be very good one day, which maybe next year, I guess, because it doesn't really sound like... It sounds like it'll be a push for him to get back at all in 2025. Anything else 250-wise?
With the field lighting up, what do we think Lopes can do on his run back in the U.S., kind of starting mid-season?
Top 5.
Top 5?
He can beat Cody. Not to slam Cody, but...
Yeah. Podium possible or no?
If he beats Cody, there's a little interesting inter-team battle there, because if he beats Club MX's number 1 guy, the dynamic there is quite interesting.
Well, especially on a Bar X bike, there's already some weirdness between the club, the Bar X, they're both untwisted, the relationships, like there's some...
Well, then, the way Enzo left club and et cetera, et cetera.
Definitely some weirdness there.
we were going to mention as well that obviously a very drama-filled week last week, most of it centering around the Lawrence management situation. Full props, I want to say, to the Lawrence clan, because I have never seen a group be so transparent and forthcoming, especially with such a serious issue. We've just discussed that we have no idea what Marchbanks has actually injured, and ultimately that's really small in the grand scheme of things. The Lawrence situation is really big in the grand scheme of things, and yet they were still very transparent, forthcoming. I've never seen a situation be handled so well in this sport. So I wanted to give them props for not just hiding away and leaving everyone's imagination to run wild. A few people were curious why there wasn't further comment on press day and in interviews at Anaheim 2. Naturally, they released their statement, so they said all they have to say. That's how these things work. You release a statement and you don't expand on that, because when it gets legal, when the stakes are high, you don't just talk about it willy-nilly and just have conversations on the record. And they did their part by releasing their statement, which again, full kudos.
And again, just to kind of raise a more magnifying glass on that, when we say that, yes, they did comment to a lot of us in media, like, yeah, that's it. Statement is what it is. We're not answering further. So when you don't see us bugging them like, hey, so let's talk about it, the answer is no. And very simple. The statement is short, sweet, to the point, and it basically covers it. You know, there was no ambiguousness between parting ways with management. They've straight up said why Myrtle was let go, what he's accused of. At this point, it's going to be a legal matter between, not even, from my understanding, not even between Lawrence and him, it's Wasserman. You know, the agency, that's where it's moved to from a legal standpoint. So yeah, until it's legally dealt with, it's a no further comment situation, but they put it out there as blunt as possible. We parted ways for embezzling. Here's why. That's it.
And thank you to them for trusting me with that as well. That was cool. I mean, terrible situation, but I appreciate the fact that they trusted me, because obviously trust is big in any situation. So
one thing we actually did not touch on, I forgot, was Jorge Prado's situation in 450. Not a fan of the Steve Mathis Memorial Nets.
It sucks. The shoulder went back in quickly. He was still at the track after the 450 main event, so that tells me there is no great concern. Otherwise, he would be getting MRIs and there would be a lot going on away from the track. The fact that he's hanging out is obviously positive, but despite that, he will not be rushing back to make it for Glendale. They are really going to take their time, be cautious, and not risk further damage, further crashes, any of that. Like, again, this is a big learning year. This is a big... Results almost are irrelevant, so there's no reason to rush this. So even if Jorge tries to rush back, I think Kawasaki are going to be like, let's take our time, take a chill pill. What's the point? Which is, in my opinion, the correct way to go.
Well, Jorge, more than almost any signing we've seen in a long time, is very much a long-term project. We talked about preseason. Cowie signed him on a 3+ 1 year deal. So, I mean, they're planning on being with him for a minimum of 4 years. Like, this is not a rush. They want to protect their investment in this case and build properly. And that on, like, I ran up the tunnel, shot him as he was leaving. I stayed at the Alpine Star rig till he came out. Yeah, came out in a sling, but was overall like joking about what he did. No, I got like one thing where he poked himself in the shoulder and winced in pain a little bit, but was pretty just like, yeah, you know, we could tape it, we could raise, but he wasn't freaking out to his team. Like, no talk of, he'll get checked out a little more, but it wasn't like, oh, they said this and we need to check out this or that. It was just like, very, very lighthearted coming out for a guy who had just been carted off.
In a weird turn of events, circling back to the Chase interview I discussed, there's about 4 minutes of Chase dissecting Prado's injury and when he thinks Prado can return. So I don't know why. Oh,
you two are doctors now too.
I don't know. Someone commented on the interview saying something, and I was like, "Watch it! I'm quite clearly a passenger." Like, I'm literally, I'm not in control of what was happening in that video at all. Obviously, you haven't watched it at the end. He was like taking a swig out of a Red Bull can, and then was like, "I'm holding the right can this time." We almost got clipped last year, and I was like, I'll stop recording now."
What was that when he was? What was that? A Coca-Cola can or something?
Yeah, I was like, shall I end the interview? Is this an interview? Anyway, so we're done?
We're done.
Okay, thank you to Decal Works, Yamaha Motor USA, Yoshimura, and Fox Racing for their support of the Vital MX post-race show, the third round of 17 of Monster Energy AMA Supercross, and the third round of 31 of the SMX World Championship complete. We are on to Glendale, the first Triple Crown of the season, the first SMX Next round of the season, and of course, another opportunity for the 450SX and 250SX stars to do battle at what is personally my favourite event of the year. Cannot beat Glendale, 10 out of 10 all round. It's going to be great, and we'll be back in 7 days' time to break it all down. So we will see you then.